Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Yellowknife today. Why is still unknown to the public. These are photos from the Prime Minister's last visit to the Northwest Territories capital in 2017. Now, during this visit, he was scheduled to be in private meetings happening today. So far, those are the only details released about his trip. And it also isn't clear if the Prime Minister will be visiting any other Northwest Territories communities this week. After 2 terms in office, including one as Premier, Carolyn Cochrane will not seek re-election. So, how will her tenure be remembered? The CBC's Sydney Cohen spoke to Northwest Territories leaders, activists, and political observers about Cochrane's leadership over the last 4 years, and she joins me now in studio to share what she found. So let's start with a bit of background about Carolyn Cochrane. How did she come to be the Premier of the Northwest Territories?
Yeah, so she's actually got a pretty interesting backstory. She's Métis and experienced homelessness as a teenager. She spent more than 20 years in social work before entering politics in 2015. And several people I spoke to said that her life experience really informed her leadership style, that she listens to people and that she always has marginalized people front of mind. Arlene Hache worked with Cochrane at the Yellowknife Women's Society in the 2010s.
Her efforts would automatically go toward the most marginalized people in the community because she was one of those people and really knew the devastation of, what that is and where that leaves you, in a community.
Okay, so you talked to Indigenous leaders, political observers, activists about Cochrane's time as Premier. What else did you hear?
So first I should say that Cochrane didn't make herself available for an interview, but with the people I did speak to, there were definitely some themes. Several held up Cochrane as an advocate for marginalized people and Indigenous rights, while some wished she'd acted more decisively during this summer's wildfires, and in talks about land and resource management. So one of those people was Chief April Martel of Katladeche First Nation. Martel praised Cochrane for listening to and advocating for Indigenous groups, but she expressed disappointment with how her government handled this summer's wildfire emergency in the South Slave. As viewers know, the KFN Reserve and the neighboring town of Hay River were evacuated twice because of wildfires this season, and the reserve was badly damaged by forest fires this spring.
That night, KFN got evacuated. She phoned my phone. I was on the highway, and I'm like, Premier Carolyn Cochrane, you should call a state of emergency. I'm like, it's urgent. You need to do that. And I even, told Minister Shane Thompson, why are you guys not calling a state of emergency? And yeah, there was nothing.
It seemed like this Legislative Assembly in particular was constantly responding to a crisis. There was floods, there was the wildfires, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic. So you did speak to Dr. Cami Candola. What did she say?
That's right. So Candola was the chief public health officer during the COVID public health crisis. She said she and Cochrane worked closely together during the pandemic, a lot of long days and late nights. Candola instituted some pretty strict public health restrictions, and though she and Cochrane faced backlash from the public, Candola maintained that she and the Premier hardly ever disagreed with each other. She said Cochrane respected her independence and supported her in public, things that other public health officials in Canada didn't really get from their premiers.
I had someone that had my back, that supported my decisions in public, that supported in real time the needs of implementing those public health measures.
So what do you think Cochrane's legacy will be?
Well, it's hard to say right now. She just left office, or she's just leaving office, but some, like Ditcho First Nations Grand Chief Herb Norwegian, said that despite Cochrane's efforts to make substantial changes, she was often hemmed in by cabinet or an immovable bureaucracy. He said she could have been more assertive on certain issues related to land management. But several people described Cochrane as a pragmatic leader, as an advocate and someone who really listened to people. Cochrane hasn't said what she plans to do next, but in her farewell address in the Legislative Assembly, she said that she's committed to public service, so we may not have seen the end of her yet.
Well, we'll keep an eye out. Sydney, thank you so much for all your work on this.
Thank you.
Wildland firefighters in the Yukon could have an easier time accessing coverage for cancer if the Yukon government makes a major change to its worker safety laws. The Yukon Workers' Compensation Minister says the government could extend presumptive cancer coverage to wildland firefighters. That means they wouldn't have to prove their job caused certain types of cancer. The rule already applies to other firefighters. That's because buildings tend to contain more carcinogenic material. But recent studies suggest wildland firefighters face similar cancer risks. There's no timeline for when the government might make this change. Yellowknife RCMP laid a slew of charges against a driver accused of sending 2 people to hospital. Police say a security guard was trying to stop an impaired driver on Franklin Avenue on Saturday when the man drove into him and then took off. Police say the driver ended up in the wrong lane of traffic going fast, and when officers tried to stop him, he sped up and hit a police vehicle head-on. The officer inside was hurt, and the vehicle was seriously damaged. RCMP arrested a 20-year-old man. They haven't named him publicly, but they have charged him with impaired driving, causing bodily harm, assaulting a police officer with a weapon, fleeing from police, dangerous driving, and more. The security guard and officer were treated at the hospital for their injuries and released. Nunavut's health department still won't commit to a timeline for its own third-party review of Iqaluit's water crisis because a different government department did its own review first. The issue dates back to 2021, when Iqaluit residents spent 2 months without clean drinking water due to fuel contamination. The Nunavut Department of Community and Government Services finished a third-party review in May of this year. Nunavut's acting chief public health officer wants to review that report first.
One thing that would not be covered by the CGS report would be decisions around do not consume orders and how those are put in place by health and how we communicate. So that's something that's more within our scope.
The May report shows conflict between the city of Iqaluit and the government of Nunavut. This ultimately slowed down emergency response to the crisis. Pawa said she agrees with the report's findings, but still could not commit to a timeline for when the health department will do its own review. Inuvic's new wind turbine is officially up and running. It's 150 meters tall, it's been turning for a week, and if all goes well, it'll help the community cut back on diesel. The CBC's Des Loreen has more.
The testing is done, the turbines are turning, all storing energy now in batteries to reduce use of diesel fuels. The turbine saves its stored energy in a newly installed battery system on site. Doug Prendergast is the manager of communications with the NWT Power Corporation. He says the wind turbine will decrease the community's use of diesel fuel.
We're pleased to let people know that the testing and commissioning phase for Inuvik Wind has been completed, and the wind turbine was declared operational on Wednesday, October the 4th.
Construction began last year and finished this summer. Prendergast says the turbine was a long time coming.
Well, I think it's an exciting time. This project has taken a long time to come to fruition. It was a complicated project logistically.
The wind turbine is currently the only source to charge the battery supply. Local solar arrays are also being looked at for additional sources. Des Loreen, CBC News, Inuvik.
Pungnuktu's first wellness center is getting ready to open its doors. The center will hold community gatherings and programming. Courtney Cox is the executive director of the Sailivik Drop-In Center in Pungnuktu. She says the new center will run in partnership with the Drop-In Center and the Nunavut Recovery Center, which is scheduled to be open in 2025. Cox says the Drop-In Center can see around 400 people coming through each month.
During typical school calendar year, it can get pretty busy, and our booking spaces get booked up pretty quickly. So we have the programs in the early evening, and then we're open for the rest of the night if people need to drop in.
Cox says the programs at the Wellness Center will complement the ones she helps oversee. The center will be run by the Suputit Wellness Committee and funded by the Nunavut Department of Health. It's expected to be open by the end of the month. A renowned singer and songwriter from Igloolik has released his first ever solo album, and it's also going to be his last. It's called Rebel Music E52143. That is the name James Ungalik was assigned in federal day school. He says his album is a way to educate others about the importance of Inuit names.
When we started attending federal day schools, although I had the name already, I was given E52143, disregarding my real name. But the school wanted me to have an English name and my parents just agreed, as directed by Southerners like the church or federal officials. I hope to use my voice to talk about these wrongdoings that happened to me and my fellow Inuit, and give some peace and comfort.
As the lead singer of Northern Haze, Ungalik is making music for decades. And last week, he told CBC he's getting ready to retire.
Johnny wanted to go back home. It was 1,000 kilometers away. They forced him to go to the Indian residential school. More than 150,000 of us children had to go. They wanted to change us.
Our Father in heaven,
hallowed
be your name.
Hallowed be your name.
Thy kingdom come,
Thy kingdom come,
thy will be done.
Thy will be done.
Kill the Indian and the child.
Here.
It's been called cultural genocide. I survived residential school. My brother Johnny did not.
Chani Wenjack was one of thousands of children who died due to Canada's residential school system. More than 80,000 survivors and their families still live with its legacy today.
Things are too good. I'm just scared that things will be taken away.
Think of the education they will receive.
You're gonna see things you never forget.
There is no way that we are going to give up when we are threatened with cultural genocide.
Sometimes it's the beautiful things that hurt the most to remember.
You promise me that you won't look back. You are our tomorrow.
Norman Wells is saving energy and money in its arena with new LED lighting.
We want to give the people in the community that use the arena the best experience that they can have. The application process was flawless, and I would encourage other communities to look into this fund with Arctic Energy Alliance.
The Arctic Energy Alliance has free advice and rebates to help you switch and save. Talk to us today.
I am in the best place in the entire world right now.
Oh, I always play with fire.
This is an epic fail.
I'm obsessed with these. I am utterly speechless.
Do you know what destiny means?
There is no power greater than that of the people.
I will not run away.
My destiny is to rule this country.
Victoria. Watch free on CBC Gem.
Every week, the issues that matter to Canadians.
These are acts of desperation.
Connecting politics to people.
Some people have lost everything.
Join me for Rosemary Barton Live.
Last month was the hottest September ever recorded. The average global temperature was so high that one climate scientist called it gobsmackingly bananas. Kieran Outshorn explains why we're experiencing such hot temperatures at such a rapidly growing rate and what it means for the future.
all over the world, September has been a really hot month.
As data confirms, September broke another global record.
An increase that one climate scientist describes as absolutely gobsmackingly bananas.
So that's a pretty specific description, and you might have heard it already, but what exactly equals gobsmackingly bananas hot? And what does it mean for the future? I feel like this chart kind of says it all. It shows in degrees Celsius how each September compares to the global average air temperature. And the bars, they show you how far off each year was from that average. And that last line, right there on the right, that tallest line, that's last month. And what we can see is that it was way above average, about 0.93 degrees, almost a full degree warmer.
When climate scientists talk about, change in temperatures, whatever, it's usually these fractions of a degree. It's not fractions of a degree anymore. 1 degree is massive.
And if you look at that line again and compare it to just last year alone, it's half a degree higher. So how does this even happen? Well, take a look at this data gathered by climate scientists. This is the air temperature for the last 80 plus years, averaged by month. And we've been talking a lot about September, but you can see here that bright red line that runs across the top of the wave. And this year has been hot all across the board, but especially over the last 4 months.
We had a record-breaking summer this year with the warmest June, the warmest July, the warmest August on record. Now we have the warmest September on record.
One of the reasons for this trend can be summed up in 2 words: El Nino.
The UN's weather agency has officially declared an El Nino.
A lot of things on Earth are cyclical, right? So when we think about El Nino, it's part of this years-long pattern of warm and cold affecting the Pacific Ocean and the entire world. And El Nino, that's the warm part. Usually we see the Pacific winds near the equator blowing east to west, and that affects the water because the warmer stuff, the stuff that's on the surface where the sun is shining, it gets pushed along and it creates this churn in the ocean that pulls cold water up from down deep below, and that flows up to the top. But during El Nino, those winds that are blowing east to west, they die down. And so that warm water that's along the surface, it stays on the surface, cooking in the sun, and you don't get that churn of cold water. So when the warm surface water stays there, well, it makes everything else warm around it. Warm water makes for warmer air, and then the hot, moist air rises and makes rain and storms and flooding, and it all just becomes a mess. So the thing to remember in this is that it's not like a light switch, right? You can't just switch it on and off. The temperature in the ocean has been rising for months, which means that the impacts that we're going to see from this warming water is just beginning.
What's happening is these hot months, they are the norm, and it's unfortunate. And on top of which, this warmth that we're seeing is coming at a time when El Nino just started. So moving ahead, they are predicting that we have almost certainty, like 90% chance of El Nino continuing on into the winter months.
And the Pacific isn't the only warm ocean this year. According to one climate scientist at NASA, quote, over the long term, we're seeing more heat and warmer sea surface temperatures pretty much everywhere. Take a look at this data from NASA's Earth Observatory. Their headline is, "The ocean has a fever." And that map shows sea surface temperatures, and they're really high. In late August, many areas were more than 3 degrees warmer than normal.
What's driving it? Ocean temperatures, which started rising early spring, have stayed warm.
You have to consider, somebody once said, how do you feel when your temperature goes up, right? Pretty rotten. And that's exactly what's happening here. And it's not without its consequences, of course.
There are always a lot of complicated factors that lead to natural weather disasters and the havoc that they bring.
We've been seeing these weather phenomena that have the fingerprints of climate change on them. It doesn't mean that every severe weather event is linked to climate change, but what we're seeing this summer is unprecedented wildfire season, flooding elsewhere, and with climate change, we continue to pump carbon dioxide, CO2 into the atmosphere, it is going to continue to warm. And that is what we're going to see more of these natural disasters phenomenon.
More extreme weather, more often, with more deadly consequences. extreme flooding in Libya, wildfires in Canada, and an earthquake in Morocco. All of these over the span of just 1 month. Thousands of people impacted, entire communities gone, lives lost or turned upside down.
Colossal, the only word to describe the damage wrought by the floodwaters or the grief left in their wake.
Climate scientists say that this string of record-breaking months in what's on track to be a record-breaking year can't be ignored.
The concern is that 2024 could just, again, be another record hot year. And to put things into perspective, 9 of the past hottest years have been all in a row.
And as the UN Secretary General said in July, when we crossed the 1.5 degree global warming point, there's no more room for complacency.
The era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived.
Whether we hear it described like that, or as gobsmackingly bananas, what's undeniable is that our climate is changing, often for the worse, and it's happening faster and faster.
That was Kieran Oudshorn reporting from Toronto. Now, an important part of research on global warming involves trying to predict how fast glaciers are melting. A team of Canadian scientists is collecting data on a British Columbia ice field that's quickly disappearing near Pemberton. The CBC's Camille Vernet has that story.
Dropped on a massive ice field, this team of scientists are here to better predict how fast glaciers are melting.
We have literally jumped off a cliff. We are finding that the melt is far exceeding, in some cases, what we had expected.
Like many others, Place Glacier is a glacier that's dying.
Over time, this material has just been accumulating at this surface. Most of it is likely sediment and rock. This surface is just getting darker and darker.
This darkening of the surface is the focus of his research.
Scanning, and that's good. We can characterize surfaces, see if it's like a clean ice or a dirty ice, or you can also use that to see how much light is absorbed and then how much it transfers into melt.
A thin layer of smoke blankets the sky.
How does that wildfire smoke affect both the surface properties, and in some cases people have also considered how the wildfire smoke can change the amount of sunlight coming through the atmosphere. So in some cases, if it's really dense smoke, it reduces that energy coming in from the sun.
There's still a lot of unknowns that the team is working to figure out. But what's clear is that the surface is darkening.
And as we start to darken these surfaces, we start to accelerate the melt from these glaciers.
Glaciers act as a natural water reservoir, storing huge amounts of fresh water. Every degree of warming is critical for their survival.
0.5. We really are at a point at which we need to act. We need to rapidly mitigate greenhouse gas emissions.
He wants people to understand the impact of our actions on Western Canada's glaciers. Camille Vernet, CBC News, Place Glacier near Pemberton.
Fall is definitely in the air in parts of the country. With Halloween just around the corner, many turn to the classic pumpkin to decorate. But with so many available, how do you choose and how can you keep it in tip-top condition? The CBC's Katie Breen went to a market in St. John's to find out.
Every single pumpkin is unique, just like you and I. So when you're looking at your pumpkin, first of all, think about what kind of design or carving you want to do. So do you want one that's kind of tall and skinny or one that's short and wide? And then what color you want too, because there's so many different colors of pumpkins now as well. Once you start actually finding your pumpkin, you want to take a look around the whole entire thing. You want to look out for cuts and bruises. So if you see any cuts that are gone right through the pumpkin, put that one aside because sadly that won't last till Halloween. If you do notice a small little bruise, maybe a dent that was put there by a rock, simply use some Vaseline and just kind of cover the hole, and then that will prevent any air getting inside and rotting the pumpkin out. And you also want to watch out for around the stem. So make sure the stem is sturdy, and sometimes the stem will crack off, but as long as it's not soft by where the stem is too, then that will still be okay. And again, Vaseline is your friend. And you want to keep it out of extreme heat and extreme cold. So don't put it right next to a heater. And if you have it outside, which you can certainly do as we have lots of our pumpkins outside right now, you just want to keep an ear to the weather. And if you hear frost, simply cover it. So cover it with an old blanket or take it inside for that night as well.
A little bit of Canadian broadcasting history has gone silent. The longest running segment on CBC Radio went off the air yesterday.
The National Research Council official time signal. The beginning of the long dash indicates exactly 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time.
The National Research Council time signal was first heard on CBC on November 5th, 1939. It aired every day for 84 years. As for why it stopped, a CBC spokesperson says the expansion of CBC broadcasting through the internet and satellites can cause delays, which led to concerns about the accuracy of the time signal. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. We leave you with a look at tomorrow's weather. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
When I arrived in Canada, there were not many women who looked like me. Not everyone was welcoming. But my husband made a new life here in this distant country. And I thought here I could belong. And many others could too. As the years went on, our town flourished. Our community worked together and took care of each other. Our children grew up with a true sense of belonging. Here in Baldi, we built our home, and we wanted others to do the same.
Established by South Asian immigrants in 1917, the mill town of Baldi, British Columbia was one of Canada's first inclusive multicultural communities.
Driving impaired destroys lives. A message from Mad Canada.
Keeping secrets, are you? No, sir.
Just like any man. Starting new.
On the run.
Whatever you're gonna do, you need to do it now.
Hang on, guys. I'm sure you'll get some action.
Promise?
Putting on that apron brings me to tears. Hey!
This is an epic fail.
Where are the pecans? I don't see the pecans.
The Stones.
The Beatles!
I did a test.
What? We were failed by history. Look where we are, under that legacy.
It's really important that we own our stories.
Yeah,
good show.
With the comedy in, with the history.
He was really funny.
Nailed it. It was great.
Still standing. Watch free on CBC Gem.
I was homeschooled as a child.
You can only be as smart as your mom. That's it.
Gross.
Okay, cool.
I love it.
Get the news you need without restrictions. Download the free CBC News app